Hi, it's Brian and the Freaks here, bringing you the sixth, I can't remember, volume in our 7-part retrospective on Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation and all the awful things that they do. In this one, we talk about a Guardian article from November of 2020, uh, planted by the Gates Foundation and one of their many paid for, uh, sort of articles, editorials, etc., that they put in papers across the country and across the world. This one advocating for the hidden joys of child labor. So, enjoy.
The nice thing is if you aren't able to code, and if you're too young to be killed by the Emmanuel's murder machine that will be in every single city, there's suicide booths that they install in every city. If you're too young for that, maybe you can become a child laborer. And there was this amazing article in The Guardian, and by The Guardian I mean the Bill and Melinda Gates sponsored editorial, which in global development. So the Gates Foundation essentially sponsors a column in the Guardian where they post their freaks up there to put forward the Gates's like freakish fucking views. And they posted one this week that the title was "Child labor doesn't have to be exploitation. It gave you life skills." And fucking
hello.
So people rightfully clowned on it online. And the Guardian, instead of changing the content of the article, which matches the original headline, they just changed the headline to "Child labor is exploitation, but the household work I did as a child gave me life skills."
Huh.
But I think
so the Gates Foundation out there, supporting the developing world, coming up with new innovative strategies and toilets for how to get the global south out of intractable poverty. We've heard a lot of their good ideas before. None of them are end imperialism, but now really it sounds like with this article they're turning sort of their eye back on us, saying stop being mad about child labor. Right?
Well, that and so they find some woman from Africa to write this, right? Or stamp her name on it at least. And the whole thing is basically like, hey, look, it essentially calls child labor like a culture issue. It is like,
cool.
Hey,
so because child labor is done in non-white cultures, being against it is racist. I feel that. Yeah.
Well, the basic summary is, which I love this, we need to embrace the blurred lines and complexities of cultural norms. So if you're like, hey, I don't think that child should be in that textile mill, you're doing a no growth now. All right. I'm afraid we're going to need you to get with the HR department. You've done a no growth. But the thing that was sort of interesting about it is, I don't know if you guys remember this. I pulled up the cover. I'm looking at it right now. But Time Magazine 2005 had this like big issue where the whole issue was just one topic: how to end poverty. And it was focusing on ending poverty primarily in Africa, right? And it had such luminaries as Jeffrey Sachs, famous for ending poverty in Russia, Jeffrey Sachs, and Bono had a like an article in it. I mean, just all the people that if you want to end poverty in the third world, these are the ones you go to. But the thing that came up over and over again, particularly when talking about Africa, was that Africa had these like giant cities that were developing because Africa was experiencing, and has been for the last 30 years, a giant move from the countryside to the urban, right? Just like everywhere around the world is. And they were looking at it and saying like, how can we get factories into those cities? Basically the whole premise. Like right now, people are too poor in a lot of these countries and too undernourished and stuff to work in factories. How can we get them just well off enough to get them into that factory? And this child labor thing, I mean, it's sort of all of a piece, right? Which is, how can we use issues of poverty and things like that to hyper exploit labor in ever new and interesting ways? But it's good
Exciting.
stuff. Yeah, it's good, exciting stuff. Now, again, people might have forgotten this too, but real heads who like to follow elections, they don't even bother to vote in, like myself. I'll remember in, I think it was in 2016 when the Republicans had everybody running. At one point, Newt Gingrich had thrown his hat in the ring, and one of his big platform pieces was bring back child labor.
Yeah.
Like, you want to fund schools, maybe have the poor kids clean it as custodians. Like maybe
Classic.
Yeah, get rid of the lunch ladies or whatever. Have the poor kids do it.
Well, this is literally how. Look, this is how the whole game is played. Like, there are, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is just one outlet that takes, the enormous capital of our ruling class toward, and puts it towards shaping like policy, and this is how it's done, and giving even liberals ammunition for how to do things that on first glance seem reprehensible. Yeah, they're winning at it too. I mean, what is like for what it's not like there's really that our laws are that stringent about doing commerce with countries that have child labor.
Well, and interesting, as the article points out too, right? In the U.S., for the cultivation of tobacco, you can use children as young as 14, which they do extensively, right? And they basically pointed out, see, I mean, hey, you guys got child labor too. And it's like, yeah, that's also bad.
Amazing.
But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, I remember I had a history professor who was always fond of saying that we live in a weird bubble of capitalism, and that capitalism's real face was the 19th century. And I think what we're seeing, in the last week of celebrating the Biden victory is a real desire to return to the 19th century, right? Like, how about we don't have regular employment? How about everybody is just contingent contract labor, right? How about child labor too? Those little kids that, right? They're like, hey, you guys are right. Like, two parents on minimum wage incomes definitely cannot support a household. So get those kids to work. Maybe you need a third and fourth breadwinner. So get little, Timmy and little Johnny into the factory. It's, we're building that bridge to the 19th century, and I'm just very excited.
Well, I'm glad we have such luminaries as Bill and Melinda Gates to light the way.
Yeah.
Who could have imagined that a little thing called Windows would be what takes us back to the Gilded Age?
Well, if the children don't want to work in the factory, they should do what Bill Gates did and steal someone else's operating system. Secure funding because your parents are rich and have connections, and then jam that operating system down people's throats by violating monopoly laws.
Cool.
The good old fashioned way. But anyways, yeah, that's the thing too. The few times I'm ever anywhere near Seattle Center and I pass by the Gates Foundation building, which is this monstrosity of fucking wealth just eating a whole city block, it's just amazing to drive by that and look at it and think about how, inside there are so many urban professionals with graduate degrees and stuff who are just coming out with new and interesting ways to justify child labor in the third being used by Nike and whatever, right? And it just warms the heart, Good stuff. Glad that charity's around. Very funny.
What? Why the fuck did they run that? Why now? What?
This is, I'm telling you, the child labor thing is that's a rich people thing, but that's a Gates Foundation deal. The Gates Foundation is the editor of this column, right? I mean, that's the thing that probably is worth mentioning is the Gates Foundation this is just propaganda from them. Like, this is news releases. This is better understood as news releases from the Gates Foundation for you.
All right. So, as Brian said, this is in The Guardian, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, global development. Child labor is exploitation, but the household work I did as a child gave me life skills. Growing up in Africa taught me to be self-reliant and resilient. Putting children to work must be seen in local context. Aged 8, Tayambili would walk with her mother every day to fetch water. On her 2-kilometer return journey in 30 degrees Celsius heat, she would carry 20 liters in an aluminum bucket on her head. Is this a story problem?
Well, first off, for an American audience, like that, for all we know, she walked like 20 feet, and it was 50 degrees. Apparently 30 degrees Celsius is 86 degrees.
Yeah, we're going to be tested on conversion later in this article. She would then help to pound maize in a mortar and prepare food for the family, typically fresh fish caught by her father on the lake. After the main...
So we're building like a very idyllic, image too. I mean, this is like a little bit of like noble savage shit, but okay.
Yeah.
After the main and only meal of the day, Tayamba, meaning we have started, in Chichewa, the national language of Malawi, in southeastern Africa, would take care of her baby sister. That young girl was me. Oh my God. Through a Western lens, some might view my experience as child labor. To me, I was learning life skills. 6 decades later, most people from this landlocked country still live in rural areas. Many are involved in agriculture for their livelihoods, including tobacco farming, so-called green gold for one of the world's poorest nations. Multinational companies make billions of dollars a year selling cigarettes in the US, Europe, and elsewhere. The tobacco is produced in tough conditions, much of it by children aged under 14.
Oh, yes, the really sympathetic tobacco industry. Great way to lead with this. I don't know. So I guess this is like a bait and switch happening here, like between like, look, I did these household chores that, were very hard because my family was very poor. But yet there were household chores that inevitably poor people are going to do, which, we might answer with, no, obviously it's not like anyone's place to come in and like regulate away child labor out of household chores. It is our place to have solidarity with humanity and end fucking poverty, you piece of shit. But then immediately it's flopping to corporate agriculture is like somehow the same thing. And no doubt just by using child labor and the original headline being like, hey guys, child labor is good, shut the fuck up. Obviously it's let's do it in factories as well. So this is just totally fraudulent.
Well, and let me give I was just like, hey, why don't we see what the child labor situation in Malawi is right now? And so this is from the U.S. Department of Labor. This is from 2019. In 2019, Malawi made a moderate advancement in efforts to eliminate the worst forms of child labor. The government elevated the Tobacco Commission to enforce the tobacco industry bill, which requires tobacco growers to report on efforts to eliminate child labor in tobacco farming and significantly increase funding of its labor inspectorate. However, children in Malawi continue to engage in the worst forms of child labor, including the harvesting of tobacco and commercial sexual exploitation. Well, now we know why the Gates. By the way, now we know why the Gates are into it.
Yeah. So basically, someone in the government in Malawi managed to pass what sounds like an incredibly tepid bill where they ask nicely for industry to cut back eventually on child labor. And this raised the hackles of the global elite. And the Gates Foundation was dispatched to, in probably multiple ways, but in one small part of the Phoenix program against these out of line legislators in Malawi, is this column.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, basically they probably are just going into like, these tobacco fields and saying, all right, who talked? And if you raise your hand, you get put into like a Gates Foundation, like medical trial, essentially.
Well, it's like the paperwork says that, but it's really just the box from Bridge on the River Kwai.
All right, go ahead, Colin. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Child labor will continue until your cultural affect improves.
These practices are rightly considered exploitative, can be physically and mentally harmful, and detrimental to children's futures by keeping them out of school. So then this next paragraph has a picture of a kid who looks like maybe they're digging through dirt, and then it says 5 myths about child labor. Read more.
Oh, Lord.
So very Starship Troopers.
By the way,
I'm doing my part.
Would you like to know more?
Oh my God. So, I mean, in some ways, this is like meant to clown on the people in Malawi who are trying to crack down on child labor by look what the big white Western press is saying about you and how dumb you are for trying to how backward you are for
okay.
trying to crack down on child labor.
So wouldn't you believe it? The 5 myths about child labor is also a Gates Foundation album. So a Gates Foundation press release.
Holy shit.
Myth number 1 is every form of child labor is bad.
Oh, no way.
Now, this is real neoliberal thought right here. Myth number 4, child labor is necessary. But he calls it a necessary evil, and they basically go on to agree, like, yeah, I mean, it is pretty much a necessary evil.
So not a myth.
Yeah. Fucking rules. So Gates Foundation doing good work.
Wait, what are the other 3?
Oh, goddamn, I just clicked away. Hold on one sec. The others are Guardian, fix your fuck. God damn it. The Guardian deserves to die. Like every this many pop-ups deserves to fucking die. Most child laborers work in factories. As they said, a lot of them work in tobacco fields. Checkmate, friends.
A lot of them work in 30-degree heat and have to walk 1 million kilometers down rows of tobacco. Whatever that means.
Child laborers, they're toasted.
Yeah, as they point out, they're like, no, most of them work in agriculture.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, they really need, what's his name?
Don Draper.
Don Draper on this campaign to save child labor in the developing world. Here's what we're going to do.
Well, that's what he did after he went to the commune and got centered again as he started working on child labor campaigns. But yeah,
I'm firing Bill and Melinda Gates.
But yeah, so they point out that actually, about 59% of child, labor is concentrated in agriculture.
Oh, guys,
just like the labor of the antebellum South. Come on, man.
Like a little kid. Oh man, I just they should really. I want to see some interviews with these child laborers about how much they love working on the farm. Just like Oh my god.
So we also have child labor only exists in poor countries. Will be the other one where they assure you that it's got to be okay because Europe and the U.S. does it too. And
amazing.
Last one, child labor helps young people transition into paid work as adults, which they point out does not. So I guess that's another reason why it's good. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's just astonishing, but it is this idea. I'm part of the neoliberal sort of.
I hate it when I give my resume for a job when I want to transition into paid work as an adult, and they're like, what were you doing between the years 1990 and 2003? And I was like, I was in education as a child. And then, next, please.
Yeah. I think too that basically you have to see this as part of the general neoliberal project of rolling back all the labor rights that were won through the labor movement, right? And they don't want to just do that at home, right? Because, the Gateses have their fingers in a lot of pots, including international ones. They want to do it abroad, too. They want to do it in the imperial periphery as well, right? And this just seems to all be a piece of, I guess, normalizing. Hey, guys, normalize child labor, all right? That's the tweet. Send.
Yeah, you're right, because they're totally trying to mystify it by painting it as this cultural feature of people who've been immiserated by like hundreds of years of empire.
Whose natural indigenous culture
was child labor.
Have existed for hundreds of years under European colonialism.
Yeah. I mean, that's the part of it too, right? Is we're talking about the the so-called natural ways of the third world, and the other part of it is just this mystifying too, where the term exploitation never seems to come into these conversations, right? That the reason why child labor is used is so that one, they're can be exploited at a higher level than adults, and two, I mean, in the case of people who are doing like homework and things like that, right? So that the adults can be exploited at a higher level, right? The children are brought in to do the labor care work, right? But yeah, the exploitation never seems to be in this conversation. It's very fascinating.
It's good, actually. So it continues. Yeah. However, where do you draw the line between what is internationally deemed a crime and a natural process of transferring skills? Is international concern on child rights relevant to Africa?
And again, this is blurring the line again, because they basically are saying, hey, look, where do you draw the line between chores and international labor crimes? And it's like, probably where the criminal code begins, would be my guess.
Basically, it's saying,
I was gonna pick a line.
Listen, these people, they're not like us. Their brain pans are more suited to servile work. And if you don't start teaching them as children, they'll put those warped brain pans to use for only crime and vice. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Hey, what did I say? Science is back, baby.
Yeah, in a big way.
It is. There's like, so that's literally the exact argument from the antebellum South, right? Yeah. Like there was this great book that came out that was called...
it's called Racism.
Yeah. There's this great book, academic book called When Slavery Was Called Freedom. And it was basically all about like the way they would frame this argument. They'd be like, no, like slavery is freedom for the slave because, essentially like their brain pan doesn't hold enough marbles. So therefore, like if we just let them loose on the world, I mean, that would just overwhelm them. They wouldn't be able to give themselves to God because they'd be so overwhelmed. So this is like the best thing, actually. But, miraculously, the best thing always seems to be the thing that benefits capital. And it's just a total rehash of that fucking argument.
Some argue that child labor perpetuates poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, population growth, and other social problems. With the exception of large organizations putting children to work, local context is everything. Mahatma Gandhi forged
to tell those nosy busybodies to keep their faces out of my sweatshop.
Having mentioned all the classical arguments against child labor, I will never mention them again. I will not refute them. Now an anecdote about Gandhi.
Oh, by the way, I noticed that they aren't going to quote anything about, Gandhi spent a little time in Africa with the Indian diaspora.
Oh, did he ever?
And I love that they're not going to mention any of the things that he thought about the African people while he was there. That
kind of like the things this article is implicitly arguing, that they have like small brain pans and must be molded into workers from a young age, or they will default to crime and vice. Yeah, I mean that's basically a quote from Gandhi. Well, he was in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean the Gates Foundation has that painted on the hallway wall. But they forgot to put the article because they see it every day. So like everybody knows that.
Mahatma Gandhi forged the way for Indian independence. The father of his nation knew a thing or two about self-reliance. Our children should not be so taught as to despise labor, he wrote in a weekly journal in 1921. There is no reason why a peasant's son, after having gone to school, should become useless as he does become as an agricultural laborer?
Love to grind up my children in the satanic mills to ensure that they don't despise labor as an adult.
Yeah, it's amazing the logic. You could just replace labor and put like having sex with children, and the same arguments would like unfold.
By the way, another thing that Gandhi actually liked, but not to talk about Gandhi and his, his
Gandhi. He was truly the Bill Gates of his time.
That's what people mean when they say that Gates is Gandhi-like. But yeah, I mean, one, could you think that maybe there's a difference between 1921 and today? Since we're all about cultural differences in this article, maybe there's a historical difference between 1921 and today. And also, again, it's just so on the nose to quote Gandhi and then be like, also, don't look into his stuff about Africa, guys. All right? Just maybe leave that on the side. I mean,
it's got a Herzogian vibe here. You're going to see in this next paragraph. So
is the dictionary quoted?
No, but there's like a refutation of your own argument, basically. So there's another little aside here that says Global Dispatch. Sign up for a different worldview. What do you think? Should we?
Oh yeah.
I want this downloaded directly to my brain. So it continues. Yes, a different era and a different continent.
But some might say stupid to even bring up. Only invites ridicule of my argument.
But after almost 100 years, Africa's single most important economic activity is still agriculture. 2/3 of its working population is employed in food and cash crop production. Malawi...
Basically, that's because they haven't allowed enough child labor in Africa. That's why Africa has remained like underdeveloped industrially. Don't look into any other causes.
Yeah, right. Just like California or like the whole middle of America.
Yeah. Not a high enough content of child labor in Africa. Definitely not the continual like exploitation and theft of all of Africa's resources.
In Malawi, it is 80%, according to the World Bank. Children, the farmers of tomorrow.
Farmers of tomorrow are the farmers of today.
Irish 5-year-olds, the industrial hands of tomorrow.
Play a crucial...
God forbid children be, trained to be cogs in the capitalist machine in fucking schools.
Yeah, this is real on-the-job training.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, though, if, this was just like Coney giving his argument for child soldiers, right? And being like, look, children are just the soldiers of tomorrow. So why not get started today?
We're wasting time.
Yeah.
They play a crucial role in the rural economy. They learn skills by observation and participating in activities such as building houses, fishing, preparing food, all essential for survival. And definitely all things that are impossible to learn without being a child laborer.
Yeah.
Again, like we're talking about things that are done in the home and in the community in poor communities and like comparing it to like child wage slavery for corporations.
Yeah. You're
keep trying to to paper over that gap there, and it ain't working.
Yeah, this is the article's whole sort of reason for being, right? Its whole thing is basically like, you're saying that, children can't be exploited in horrifying tobacco fields for the sake of R.J. Reynolds. Well, you must not want your kids to do chores. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
The purpose of an article like this is, as a PR test. Mm-hmm. It's like, let's see how, because all the shittiest things we believe, all the learned truths that our neoliberal hell, the citizens of our neoliberal hell, like just believe like the water they're swimming in. They all started like with shit like this, with people putting up some bird brain fucking argument and seeing if it stuck. And the shit that sticks becomes what gets like just bashed into the brains of all the idiots on this planet. Just be how they think the world works forevermore, you know?
No, it's like when you have a like shitty fast food job and you're like scared of being fired in the beginning, so you like make the hamburgers good, but then you like slowly make shitty ones and nobody says anything, and you realize, why am I bothering? And you just make them shittier and shittier. This is the test. They're handing you the shit sandwich and seeing if you'll accept it, and if you do, oh, is there more coming down the road? Right?
Ooh, these skills are transferred from elder family members to children, from mother to daughter, father to son. But from an outsider's perspective, these at-home chores can be viewed negatively. All right, here's your definition, Greg. The International Labor Organization defines child labor as work that deprives children of their childhood, their potential, and their dignity, and that is harmful to physical and mental development. At the most extreme, it involves child slavery, separation from families, or exposure to life-threatening hazards. Other examples may involve children being kept home from school in order to keep the household.
So it sounds like she's about to tear down this definition of child labor, and that should really just be seen as an example of like the problem with leaving the libs to defend the rights and dignity of humanity. You know, like they're gonna have shit like this that doesn't stand up in the face of like a determined capital class.
Yeah.
Child labor is not new. To varying extents, it has existed throughout history. In 19th century Britain, Victorian factories and mines exploited children on a massive scale. Indeed, it was a worldwide problem, not just during industrialization, but throughout the last century. Today, contrary to popular belief, most child laborers are employed by their parents rather than in manufacturing or the formal economy.
Yeah, the other part of it too is if you want to learn about how much fun that was, I mean, you can read like any Marx or Engels and hear about what a great time everybody was having in Victorian Britain. I will
trying to have it both ways, trying to go like, to be sure, the bad child laborer is bad. But what I'm trying to do is say that like things that people out there want to label child labor are really not the same thing. We need, we need a new definition.
They're micro internships.
But I will point out that hilariously, if you go to the International Labor Organization, their definition of child labor is much longer and extensive than weirdly what was quoted on this article, including things like forcing children to work below the minimum age of work, of labor, right? And all this kind of stuff. So they actually do talk about issues of exploitation and stuff like that as well. But again, can't have that in this conversation. Let's just keep it to about chores.
Yeah.
In Africa, where many areas have no social security or social services,
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Let's not get into it, though.
To support the vulnerable, families are responsible for educating and training the next generation to become capable adults. Those with good life skills become self-reliant and resilient because they can support themselves against all odds.
Bootstrapping.
Wow.
There's an African proverb: pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah. And the other African proverb is anyone who doesn't is because they are
they don't have good life skills.
And devoid of life skills. Yeah.
They deserve what's coming to them, which is child labor.
Jesus.
They'll be wishing they were child laborers when we're done with them as adults.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Again, the whole argument seems to be, hey, look, Europe and the United States worked very hard for centuries to underdevelop and exploit and rob the shit out of Africa. And because of that, look, your kids just have to become child laborers. I don't know what to tell you. That's the only way to resolve this situation is to then turn the children of Africa into child laborers for RJ Reynolds. Again, the thing that we keep forgetting is that this is in Malawi specifically. This is for the tobacco industry.
There is an African proverb: by crawling, a child learns to stand. Without these life skills, the young adult is the laughing stock of the community, dependent on others for food, clothing, and even shelter.
Jesus Christ.
The degree to which this is internalized, like the logic of basically 21st century neoliberalism, is incredible. Like she's basically talking about a meritocracy.
Yeah. She's literally saying bootstrap it.
Yeah. And
the problem with Africa is not enough bootstrapping.
Not enough child labor.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's come down to. The literal argument of this is the reason Africa is underdeveloped or poor is because there isn't enough child labor. They just didn't have a high enough quantity.
Well, it's also building a structure for you to view it in, a lens for you to view it that is backwards, that flips the image like looking into a spoon, right? Like it's like instead of asking why is Africa overall poorer than the global north, and why are people in these positions of having to exploit their own children for their labor, or send their children to be exploited for their labor for the pittance that it returns, instead of asking like what structural things are causing that, just learn to love the exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Well, instead of reading the widely available online book by Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, try just going into tobacco fields and doing a little better, working a little harder.
I have been involved in development in sub-Saharan Africa for most of my working life. Local context is the hallmark of effective development work. What works in one community may have no place in another, and an appreciation of diversity and cultural norms is key to success.
Weird, that was the antebellum South's argument too.
Yeah, also, how you doing on developing Africa? I mean, this is like the British Empire's argument too, right? It's like, we're developing. Yeah, no. I'm here doing it. We're doing the development.
Yeah, we're doing the work.
It doesn't work for various, cultural reasons. Like we want to build our, we want to give them the steam locomotive and develop their transport, but we just can't figure out how to make it work culturally.
I mean, this is the big part of the sort of, not the only, but one of the big reasons for the use of sort of race and racism and in the imperial context, right? Is at some point when you're creating this sort of white man's burden kind of mythology around your imperial adventures, eventually somebody's asked the question, you've been doing all this work to develop the third world. How come it still sucks ass? It's still poor shit. And to that, all you can say is racism. Definitely not what we're doing there. Like, it's we're definitely not creating the problem. That's for sure. It must be some other mysterious ingrown factor.
It's the misshapen brains of the natives.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know why all the natives die every time we run into it.
It's innate to their biology.
Yeah. Every time we meet the natives, they die. I don't know why that is. Probably their biology. If I had to guess.
Over the past decade, there has been a significant shift towards localization. Local experts and communities receiving aid have become much more involved in development rather than having values imposed from the West. Isn't that literally what's happening?
Yeah, because what they mean by localization is the West essentially in exchange for getting loans from, people like the Gates Foundation, but also from the World Bank and stuff. The governments of these countries have to dismantle, programs like social service programs and stuff like that have to be dismantled. And so then the money goes to groups on the ground. And it just turns out those groups on the ground are literally like Gates Foundation freaks. And this is called localization, not exploitation, apparently.
Well, isn't it a coincidence, though, that like all these different local cultures across the developing world all have the exact culturally specific belief in the use of child labor. And isn't it interesting how actually, their main cultural norm is their own poverty and desperation. So that's what they're doing here, is they're trying to use the language of like woke, like cultural, like diversity, cultural relativity to describe what they're actually selling as a universal cultural trait of anyone who's poor, and that trait is poverty, which is and essentially always comes back to this essentially conservative, like all the way back to like Burkean logic of like this shit is cultural. This is where like you're saying racism comes from, because that's what they're saying. They're saying like the desperation and poverty is their culture, and that's why we have to do child labor.
Yeah.
Everywhere. In all these culturally specific ways, everywhere.
Yeah.
Turns out you're going to be
poverty shit, right?
Yeah, you're going to be real surprised, white America, when it turns out you actually have a culture that embraces child labor too. You may not know it now, but I've studied many cultures. Of all the cultures I've studied throughout my life, I've never actually seen a culture so poor, desperate, and enthralled with child labor as America. We're just waiting to get back to our roots.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that, and I love too this idea of it's the bootstrapping idea too of like, well, what makes these people impoverished is they didn't do enough child labor to learn the vital skills and stuff necessary to have the kind of like wealth and development that the first world has. The kind of job skills and life skills that people like the Trump kids and Biden's kids have that have led them to be, self-made millionaires.
Well, when you're selling it to liberals, the exploitation is always just a prerequisite for development.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, no, really all we need, all these poor, backward, culturally specific peoples of the developing world with their faulty brain pans need is to commit to child exploitation for just one generation. But if they could all get on board for just that one generation, for a solid 20 years of really brutal child exploitation, you'd emerge with a whole new culture of self-starters who were on the come up, and you'd have, Silicon Valleys popping up all across the Sahara.
Yeah. It was the child labor situation just outside of San Francisco. That's what created Silicon Valley.
Yeah, dude, that's how they all got their work ethic. Yeah. That's how they all became rise and grind guys, is they were... they had a machete and were hacking bananas out of fucking trees at 6,
I can't help but think of John Carpenter's comments about Kurt Russell here, but that would support this argument. So I'm going to keep those to myself. Programs are now run by talented and empowered national staff
who were once children. In the tobacco fields.
Yeah.
The beneficiaries are no longer passive recipients of grant funds, but are part of the solution.
Welfare queens. It's literally a welfare queens argument. Jesus fucking Christ. I hate this country so much. I fucking hate the United States.
Defining the challenge and how best to tackle it.
Oh, that, the classic liberal meritocratic strategy of identifying a problem before you try to solve it. Fucking innovation.
Yeah.
Essence of innovation right there.
Hey, if they hadn't invented that in 1994, we wouldn't be in the place we're in right now. So thank you. That's the kind of innovation that gets Robbie Mook another job running campaigns.
Yeah, I think Microsoft got the patent on that when they bought Netscape Navigator or some shit.
Involving parents enables them to make the right decisions. My advice has always been that children should have the chance to go to school, as I did 60 years ago, to play and to act their age. However, we cannot tell mothers and fathers how to parent or what to do in their own homes.
I'm pretty sure...
Disgusting.
Yeah, it's like, I'm pretty sure that actually in most countries that like, no, you absolutely can tell parents like what to do with their kids.
Yeah,
in
and
their own
also,
home.
again, we're just saying, no, these cultures want to do this, not because of
Mhm.
course it's part of the way they think of doing life because they're poor and desperate, and this is what they need to do to survive. Like, God forbid anyone like dream of anything better for the children of the world. Oh, fuck, man, like that's really fucking bleak.
Well, that, and I get why Bill Gates wants the parents to be in charge of what happens inside their own homes with their
There
kids.
should be
But
a counselor on every factory floor, and they should do parent conferences once a quarter.
Understanding the distinction between exploitation and transfer of life skills is critical for development workers stepping into any community.
Cool. Still looking for it, you piece of shit. You haven't identified that at all here. You've mentioned school, which is a place to, teach kids life skills, including, you can teach kids in school about like jobs in factories.
yeah.
Fucking Christ.
We need to embrace the blurred lines and complexities of cultural norms. The world should not be painted with one brush.
And it's all blurred lines. It's just so hazy. It's like it's like this is Heart of Darkness, right? I mean, I told you, Brian, I never really understood what Heart of Darkness was getting at, but I gather like cultural confusion was a part of it. The sort of terror of going deeper and deeper into like a cultural fantasia that you can't understand. And I feel like that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I mean, it's the terrifying journey into a place that you've irrevocably destroyed, but also don't understand it because you've destroyed it, and now you're scared.
So, that is Heart of Darkness. Then
Thing you
you're
created.
looking at It's about someone, a settler, coming in and surveying deeper and deeper into what has become like a cultural wasteland, a culture turned upside down and inside out and destroyed by the very direct but never witnessed actions of the settler himself and his people, and then seeing only the degradation and never the original form.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is exactly what this is. This woman is saying, like, you gotta, you can't tell these people what to do because this is their culture. And it's like, you did this. The people you work for did this. Like, there are very few indigenous cultures, and untouched by capital. They should absolutely have self-determination, but to sit here and go like, well, in a context, this person's talking about a political context where they're not going to get that, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Nor is it desirable.
right. So we're not talking about a project here that is about pulling back imperialism and giving self-determination to the exploited peoples of the underdeveloped world, right? No, we're saying the class relationships and the colonial and financial relationships are going to stay exactly what they are. And in that context, you shouldn't, when you get angry at child exploitation, you're really getting angry at these exploited cultures, not capital itself, but these indigenous cultures.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck off. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I don't know if
it's a way to blame everything except for the actual economic system that the people are living under, right? And Marx, going all the way back in Capital, talked extensively about capitalism's effect on its deleterious effect on the family, right? Mm-hmm. And talked extensively about the fact that, like, look, families aren't the product of some innate genetic culture or something. They're the product of the world they live in. And if you live in a horrifying exploitative planet, or right, in a horrifying exploitative system, yeah, the father becomes the despot of the household who puts his children to work just like the factory owner does, right? And it's like, that's not good, though. You shouldn't celebrate that. That's not developing a work ethic. That's just exploitation, right? You know, and how exploitation rolls through every rung of society and wrings out any humanity that could possibly exist. And I think generally on the left, at least, we're supposed to see that as bad. Now, at the Gates Foundation, apparently this is extremely desirable. So just wonderful work they're doing over there. And thanks as always.